Over 3,000 years ago, in a temple in northern Kemet, someone picked up a chisel and started erasing a name. Not just any name, the name of a god. Statues were toppled, reliefs scraped away stone by stone. In some temples, his face was replaced with another god's, as if he had never existed. And here's the strange part. That same god, centuries earlier, had a pharaoh who carried his name with pride. He was worshipped as the personal protector of Rameses the Great, arguably the most powerful king Kemet ever had. How does a god go from guardian of the pharaoh himself to an enemy erased from history? This is Set. Stay with me until the end, because the answer isn't about religion. It's about power, and about how history gets written by the winners, even when the winners are gods. Before we talk about Set's fall, you need to understand one thing. Kemet isn't a name the Greeks invented. Egypt comes from Greek. The people themselves called their land Kemet, the Black Land, a reference to the fertile soil along the Nile, as opposed to Deseret, the Red Land, the hostile desert that surrounded it. And it's exactly on that border, between fertile land and desert, that Set is born, mythologically speaking. Set was not, originally, a god of evil. That's the first major distortion we need to undo. Set was the god of storms, of the desert of chaos. But chaos, to the people of Kemet, wasn't synonymous with evil. It was a force. Just as the Nile could nourish or destroy, Set represented the unpredictable side of nature. Sandstorms, earthquakes, the unknown beyond cultivated land. In the oldest texts we have, the pyramid texts, carved more than 4,300 years ago, Set appears alongside Horus, helping the deceased king ascend to the sky. He's not a villain. He's necessary, because in the Kemetic worldview, order without chaos is stagnation, and chaos without order is total destruction. Set is the force that exists to be controlled, not eliminated. But every story of balance has a breaking point, and Set's begins within his own family. Kemet's divine family tree is easy to state and hard to live. Set and Osiris were brothers, children of Nut, goddess of the sky, and Geb, god of the earth. Osiris was the elder brother, the civilizing king, the one who, according to myth, taught the people of Kemet agriculture, law, and ritual. A king of order and abundance. Set was the younger brother, and according to nearly every version that survives, the most complete one recorded centuries later by the Greek author Plutarch, but rooted in far older Kemetic sources, Set couldn't stand living in his shadow. Here is what the texts describe. Set throws a banquet. He has a custom-fitted coffin built, magnificent, ornate, and, in a joking tone, says he'll give it as a gift to whoever fits inside it perfectly. One by one, the guests try. None of them fit, until Osiris lies down inside and fits perfectly, because of course, the coffin had been measured for him. The instant Osiris is lying down, Set and his accomplices slam the lid shut, seal it with molten lead, and throw the coffin into the Nile. Osiris, the god who brought civilization to Kemet, dies at his own brother's hands. But Set doesn't stop there. In some versions of the myth, he goes even further and dismembers Osiris's body into pieces, scattering them across the entire territory to make sure it could never be reassembled and brought back to life. This was the first recorded murder in Kemetic mythology, and for many historians, it's the founding scene that will define Set's image for the next 3,000 years. But Osiris's scattered body wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning of the revenge. Before we continue, if you're enjoying how ancient mythologies hide politics, power, and betrayal inside their own myths, this is exactly the kind of content I make here. Hit subscribe, because what's coming next is even more intense. While Set takes the throne, Someone is out there hunting down the pieces of her murdered husband's body. Isis, Osiris's wife and sister, travels across all of Kemet, gathering every scattered fragment. With the help of her sister Nephthys, who, ironically, was Set's own wife, she reassembles the body, performs the first mummification rites in Kemetic mythology, and manages, through magic, to conceive a child from Osiris's lifeless body. That child is Horus, and here the story shifts genres, from tragedy to survival, knowing that Set would kill the child the moment he learned of his existence, because an heir of Osiris is the only thing capable of threatening the throne he stole. Isis flees to the marshes of Chemes, in the Akbit region, and raises Horus in hiding, far from his uncle's eyes. She protects him from snakes, from scorpions, from poisoning attempts. In some versions, Ra himself sends the god Thoth to heal the child when he's stung and near death. Horus grows up knowing one single thing. One day, he will confront the uncle who killed his father. And that's exactly what happens, just not the way you'd expect. Because this war isn't going to be settled on the battlefield. It's going to be settled in court. This isn't a translation exaggeration. The most complete Kemetic text on this conflict, known as the Contendings of Horus and Set, preserved in Papyrus Chester Beatty I, describes a trial that drags on for 80 years before the tribunal of the gods, presided over by Ra himself. On one side, Horus, the rightful heir, son of the murdered king. On the other, Set, the usurper claiming to be stronger, more experienced, more capable of protecting Kemet from external threats. And the tribunal can't reach a decision. The gods split. Some think Horus is too young to rule. Others remember Set has already proven himself a murderer. Thoth records everything. Ra, the supreme judge, seems reluctant to take a side. Then the challenges begin, and this is where the myth reveals that this dispute was really about legitimacy and deception, not brute strength. Set challenges Horus to a hippopotamus form contest underwater. Whoever stays submerged longest wins. Isis intervenes to protect her son, and the challenge ends in chaos, with Set accusing her of cheating. In another episode, the two compete in a stone boat race. Horus cheats. He builds a wooden boat disguised as stone with plaster, while Set, following the rules, uses real stone, which sinks instantly. And there's the most delicate episode in the entire myth, which needs context to be understood correctly. At one point in the dispute, Set attempts to disqualify Horus as heir through a sexual assault, trying to assert dominance over his nephew in front of the tribunal. Isis, upon discovering this, guides Horus to turn the situation to his advantage, exposing Set's action before the other gods and transforming the attempted humiliation into evidence against the aggressor himself. However uncomfortable this episode is to modern eyes, it served a clear function within the logic of the myth. It was one more attempt by Set to win through transgression rather than merit, and once again, he's exposed for it before the divine tribunal. After 8 decades of disputes, traps, and appeals, Osiris himself, now in the underworld, ruling the realm of the dead, sends a threatening message to the tribunal. If justice isn't served, he will send demons to drag the gods down into the underworld. The threat works. The tribunal finally decides, and that decision will completely transform Set's role within the mythology. Forever, Horus is crowned the rightful king of Kemet. This myth, in fact, becomes the foundation of Kemetic royal ideology for millennia to come. Every living pharaoh is the embodiment of Horus, and upon death becomes Osiris. And Set. Here's the twist most videos about Egyptian mythology simply skip over. Set is not destroyed, not banished, not killed. He's reassigned. The gods decide that the brute force and chaos that define Set cannot be removed from the cosmos, because, remember the beginning, chaos is necessary. So instead, that force is redirected to protect creation. Set is placed at the prow of Ra's solar bark and given a new mission. Every night, as Ra crosses the underworld, the serpent of absolute chaos, Apophis, tries to devour him and destroy the order of the universe, and who fights Apophis night after night to make sure the sun rises the next day. Set, the murderer of Osiris, becomes, literally, the only god strong enough to stop the end of the world, every single night, forever. Think about that for a second. The same mythology that describes Set as his own brother's killer also describes him as the guardian preventing total annihilation of existence. The Kemetites didn't see a contradiction there. They saw function. And it's exactly that duality that allowed Set to become, for a long stretch of Kemetic history, one of the most respected gods in the pantheon. If you think a murderer god would never have temples, devoted worshippers, or even kings named after him, history proves otherwise. As early as the Second Dynasty, around 2700 BCE, Pharaoh Peribsen does something unprecedented. Instead of placing the falcon of Horus above his royal name, as was tradition, he places Set's animal there instead. For the first time, a king presents himself explicitly under Set's protection, not Horus's. Centuries later, during the period of the Hyksos, invaders from the Levant who controlled parts of Kemet, Set is adopted as their primary deity, identified with the foreign god Baal. And when native Kemetic kings retake power and expel the Hyksos, curiously, they don't abandon Set. Quite the opposite. The 19th dynasty, the same one that produced Rameses II, one of the most powerful pharaohs who ever lived, openly worships Set. Ramesses' own father was named Seti, literally man of Set. And Rameses raises stelae celebrating Set as one of the great protective deities of Kemet, alongside Amun, Ra, and Ptah. At this point, Set isn't a villain. He's military strength, courage, protection against outside chaos, exactly the kind of quality an expanding empire, surrounded by enemies, needs to celebrate. For nearly 2,000 years, Set was one of the most respected gods in Kemet. So what changed? How does this same god, celebrated by kings and empires, end up erased from the walls of his own temples? The answer isn't in the mythology, it's in the politics. Starting at the end of the New Kingdom, Kemet begins suffering wave after wave of invasions: Libyans, Nubians, Assyrians, and later, Persians. The territory that once defined its identity in opposition to the hostile desert was now constantly invaded from that very desert. And this is where Set's ancient association with the foreign, with the desert, with out there, once just a trait of his nature, turns into a political problem. Set increasingly becomes identified with foreign invaders. First the Hyksos, retroactively reframed as oppressors, then the Assyrians, then the Persians. Each wave of foreign domination reinforces the narrative. Set is the force from outside, the threat, the other. In the late period, especially from the 25th and 26th dynasties onward, priests across several regions of Kemet begin systematically erasing Set's name and image from temples, stelae, and monuments. The same kind of erasure, known as damnatio memoriae, that we also see in other ancient cultures directed at figures deemed undesirable. At Karnak and other major religious complexes, ancient reliefs of Set are chiseled away, and in some cases, covered over with the image of another god. Temples that once celebrated Set are reconsecrated to deities associated with order and pure Kemetic identity. By the Greco-Roman period, Set is already portrayed almost exclusively as a malevolent figure, linked by Greek authors like Plutarch to Typhon, the monster of chaos in Greek mythology. It's this version, filtered through foreign eyes and already far removed from the original complexity, that will travel through the centuries and reach us today. The evil god we know today is in large part an image built more than 2,000 years after the original myth. The same god who once protected Ra from total cosmic destruction. The same god who gave his name to powerful pharaohs, reduced in popular memory to a simple malevolent shadow. And that brings us to the real question behind this entire video. Set wasn't born a villain. He didn't die a villain. He was made into one gradually over centuries, as Kemet's politics, invasions, and sense of identity kept shifting. That tells us something uncomfortable about how we look at any story, ancient or modern. The labels hero and villain are rarely fixed facts. Often, they are decisions made by whoever, at that moment, held the power to write the narrative, raise the temple, or chisel away the relief. Set killed his brother. That's an undeniable part of the myth. But he also protected the sun every single night for millennia of belief. Both things are true at the same time because Kemetic mythology, unlike many traditions that came after it, never required its gods to be morally simple. Maybe the question isn't, was Set good or evil? Maybe the question is, who decides and why? That a necessary force of the universe suddenly becomes an enemy to be erased. If this video changed the way you see Set, and maybe even the idea of villain itself, leave that in the comments. And if you want to find out about the next figure history tried to erase, you already know where to look.